What type of person do you think would suit living in La Rochelle?
I can definitely see it appealing to a variety of different kinds of people. As I mentioned, my friend who lives down there is a young family. She's got two kids under the age of 3. And she actually has met other expats down there, and not necessarily in her age range, though. So she's met other expats, I think, that are a little bit older than she is. But she says in the mom field, she hasn't necessarily found anyone else down there. So in terms of expats, though, she mentioned that there are definitely some retirees living in the area. I would say mostly British. Definitely, I don't think I heard of any American. Actually, I've heard of one American couple in the region. I don't necessarily know. There might be more in La Rochelle, but I have heard of one recently moved American couple to a bit south of where we're talking about right now. But so there are a few expats finding their way here. Definitely the majority are going to be British and maybe a few Irish, but you may start a trend of Americans moving down here. But I definitely think that this is a really appealing place for anyone of retirement age. I definitely noticed an abundance of people who seemed of retirement age out and about enjoying the open air there. So I was actually there in early mid-October, and it was still extremely warm. It was in the 70s every day that I was there. People were getting into the ocean the day that I was there. And so everybody on the beach that I saw looked like they were of retirement age. And, it was a weekday, so maybe that was the reason. But a very active senior community, people out enjoying the beaches with their dogs, with their grandkids or their kids, getting in the water. Even, mid-October, it looked very comfortable. People in their bathing suits this time of year, walking around the outdoors. There are, picnic tables everywhere, and they're all just filled with people playing cards or board games. Throwing a stick for a dog, people biking all over. There were great bike paths all around the coastline in the city. And I definitely noticed a big emphasis on seniors out and about enjoying the fresh air. And so I imagine, maybe there are 3-4 months a year where it's not necessarily as comfortable to be outside. But I think this is a place where for 9-10 months of the year, really the community is very focused on being outside. And that's the history of this community as well. So it's definitely also a very strong sailing community. I grew up a sailor's daughter. And if anybody's familiar, I grew up half of my childhood in Annapolis, Maryland, where he lived on a little 28-foot sailboat. So I'm very familiar with, this Annapolis, they say, is the sailing capital of America. And this is absolutely a sailing town, diehard sailing. There's a big rivalry between boaters and motorboaters and sailors in the boating world. And I would say this is more of a sailing community. Of course, there's always some motorboaters in the mix. Huge marina. So what I'm getting at is if you're into being in the outdoors, if you're into ocean sports, if you're into boating, if you like fishing is a massive, it has historically been the main industry of this port town. Going back to the Romans, but the fishing there is still excellent. I found a book when I was visiting one of the little, basically a little island nearby that's kind of mostly a fishing island, a lot of oysters and clamming and stuff like that. There are also salt marshes there, which was originally why the town was founded by the Romans. For the salt marshes. But I found a book in one of the little fishing shops that was called Fishing by Foot. And so the idea, it was that you just walk along the beach, and this book would show you everything that you could find just by walking down the beach that you could eat. And so it was, these are the things that are found in abundance. And it was a thick little booklet. And in the back, there was a pull-out thing with holes where you could measure the size of the different cockles and shellfish that you could get and figure out how to tell what kind of shellfish it was. When I was in that shop, somebody came in and said he needed a bigger oyster bag to go out and catch his oysters. He'd already filled up her first bag that morning. When I was down on the beach, I saw some guys with, their welly boots on and buckets, just filling up buckets with oysters and clams. So really fun outdoor kind of water-based community. Really fun place for kids as well, whether you have them now or they might be visiting you or grandkids visiting you there. Really fun community for kids, small community, and lots of little sailing schools, swimming schools, everything like that. And also the biking. This was actually one of the first cities in France. I want to actually say maybe in Europe as well. I'm forgetting the statistic that put a bike share, or that had a successful public bike sharing system that goes back to the 70s even. So, long before it was a trendy thing in every city, La Rochelle was trying to already get its citizens out on bikes. And so there are bike paths all through the city, all around all the islands. Really, really fun place to just, to be outside and to kind of connect with nature while also living in a city with all of the amenities and conveniences of living in a city.
How would you get to La Rochelle? Is it easy to access? Is it difficult?
I mean, it's not difficult. It's, a bit further than if you're living in the capital city of a Western European country. So, in terms of access, I'm thinking in terms of getting to and from North America. And when it comes to that, when you're, going across the Atlantic, basically, unless you're living in London or Paris or Barcelona or Madrid or Lisbon, unless you're living in a capital city of Europe, you're always going to have to make another transfer. I mean, more or less, you're always going to have to make another transfer or get a train. So, you would fly typically into Paris, and the train from Paris is 3 hours direct, very easy. I really love the train. And, for Americans, the train might not seem, it seems a little maybe old fashioned or something, but in Europe, the train systems are fantastic. I love traveling by train. They aren't necessarily as affordable as you might like them to be. It can often be the same price as a flight, but it can be much more enjoyable. You get to see more of the country. I find it to be a relaxing way to travel. But my point is, you can get off the airplane and then have a nice, relaxing 3-hour train ride down to La Rochelle.
What about the cost of living? Just a basic 2-bed. What would you rent for?
Basic. So again, we're looking at mostly apartments, especially in the city center, which is what I was focusing on. So a comfortable budget would be about $1,500. But you could also, the longer you spend in a market and the more you get into it and find out what the local sources should be, the better deals you're going to get. But so $1,500 though would be a very comfortable budget. You would be able to get a 2-bedroom for a 2-bedroom at maybe like 70 square meters of space, 75 square meters or more, possibly. And that's pretty generous for France. Like I'm used to Paris where the apartments are much smaller and a lot more expensive, but it's not that difficult to find 2 bedrooms or to find places that are more than 50 square meters, which is actually quite hard in Paris, especially when you want it to be affordable. So really nice apartments and mostly pretty modern as well, which again is different from where I am, where most of the buildings are really old. So it's nice, when you have modern stuff that works, elevators in every building, which you can't necessarily depend on here in Paris, and, fully equipped with usually a doorman, or not a doorman, but a guardian, they call it, of the building. So, and of course, you could go lower than that if you wanted to live slightly outside of the city. For example, where my friend is living, she has a small house with a garden and everything, and she bought her house. So I don't have a rental figure necessarily for that, but your rent would actually go down while your space went up, as it often does when you leave the city. So living just outside the city, you might want a car, but you could still get by without one. My friend says she has one now because they have 2 such young kids, but as soon as the kids are older, already they're trying to bike more and use other forms of transportation more. And she said they're getting rid of the car as soon as the kids are out of car seats, basically. And so eating out, definitely pretty affordable. So mid-range local restaurant, I would say 70 to 80 euros for 2 or 3 courses plus wine. And, wine in France is very cheap. So any restaurant is going to have a glass for 5-6 euros, maybe even less, depending on the, how high end the restaurant is. So wine really isn't ever an issue when you're adding that on.
So would you say this is a place for an investment opportunity, or is it more just a lifestyle play?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily an investment place. I don't see there being a huge boom in property prices anytime in the near future. So you'll see maybe some steady appreciation. But definitely, I think more of a lifestyle option. If you were to invest here, yeah, I can't really think that it would be something for the average investor. If you were to invest, I would say one of the better places to do so might be on one of the islands, which are increasingly more touristed, but also incredibly expensive. So Ile de Ré, just off the coast, the most popular island, very, very popular with French and British tourists. The property prices there are said to be, I think, the third highest in France, and it's a tiny little island. So if you had a lot of money, it might be worth buying something there, but it's also very difficult to buy. The locals don't want to sell to you. So no, I don't think it's necessarily an investment destination.
Could you do a one-sentence summary of the best option in France for residency?
Most people are going to probably want to take a visitor visa, which technically isn't a permanent residency necessarily right away, but it allows you to live in France on your own income, proving that you are self-sufficient, and it doesn't make you a tax resident in France. So that's probably the option most people are going to take, and it requires, technically by law, the number is, I think, 1,400 euros per month guaranteed income. But the more you have, the more you can show, the more likely, or the more quickly at least, and the more likely your application is to be accepted. So basically, show your assets and you can be resident in France. It does not give you, access to the social system, for example, because you would have to be paying taxes for that. You'd have to be tax resident. So it depends a little bit on what you want to get out of the system, what you want to put into it. But the simplest is that one, the self-sufficiency option.
And then you would pay for things like healthcare, for instance. You just pay out of pocket.
Exactly. Yeah. And the healthcare is affordable enough that you could definitely do that and just have, kind of catastrophe insurance policy.